They say wealth builds kingdoms, and in kingdoms, love rarely rules. Zara and I were betrothed before we could spell each other's names. Born into two of the wealthiest families in Mexico, our futures were inked in gold before we even lived them. Our parents raised us side by side, like we were puzzle pieces meant to fit. I never questioned it. She was pretty, smart, predictable. My future wife. That was the script. Until the day I met Zayden. He wasn't supposed to be there. Our estate was groomed like a royal gallery, nothing out of place, no faces unfamiliar. The gardeners wore uniforms, moved like shadows, and never looked you in the eye. But that day, one shadow broke form. He was bent over in the far corner of the grounds, just beneath the arch where my mother's roses grew. Sweat had soaked the back of his shirt. His jeans were torn at the knees, earth caked on his hands and face like war paint. But his eyes, when they lifted and caught mine across the yard, weren't lowered. They weren't afraid. He looked at me like I was just a boy. Not the boy. Not the heir. I paused. "Morning," he said, wiping his brow with a muddy wrist. His voice was rough, but not in the way of the unpolished. It was warm, textured. Like he'd used it for things other than yes sirs and apologies. "You're new," I replied, before I could think better of it. He stood fully then, taller than I expected. Built like someone who worked for a living, not someone who wore silk shirts and signed papers he didn't read. "First day," he said with a shrug. "I'm Zayden." He wasn't supposed to give me his name. That was the first rule. Distance. Titles. Barriers. But I didn't correct him. I didn't give him mine, either. Instead, I nodded once and walked away. But I watched from my window. Every day after that. Watched the way he worked, like the ground owed him something, and he was digging to find it. He talked to the plants when no one was looking. Laughed to himself. Swore when he cut his finger on a thorn. He was alive. Not scripted. Not posed like the rest of us. Zara and I had tea in the West Pavilion every Friday. Our parents insisted on routine. We'd talk about the charities we were being assigned, the press statements we were rehearsing. She'd mention floral arrangements for the wedding, and I'd nod, already forgetting them before she finished. But one Friday, I heard his laugh, Zayden's, from the other side of the hedge. Zara was telling me about tablecloth textures, but I couldn't focus. That laugh, it pulled at something in me I didn't know could move. Later that evening, I found him again. This time he was alone, pulling weeds by the stone path. "You missed a spot," I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. He looked up, smirked. "So you do talk." I stepped closer. Too close, by the rules of our world. But he didn't step back. "You shouldn't speak to me," I whispered. "Then stop listening." I didn't. I couldn't. And that was the moment, so small, so stupid, where my life cracked. Just a hairline fracture. But you don't notice the fall of kingdoms until the first stone loosens. And Zayden was mine. I started walking earlier. Not for health. Not for clarity. Just for him. I told my mother I needed fresh air, a new routine to clear my head. She was thrilled, said it would look good in interviews. A disciplined young man always rises with the sun. If only she knew what really woke me. Zayden. Every morning, he was out before the rest of the staff. Shirt clinging to his back, headphones dangling from one ear, dirt under his fingernails like it belonged there. Sometimes he'd hum to himself. A tune I didn't recognize. Maybe it wasn't even a tune, just the sound of someone comfortable in their own skin. I'd pass by slowly. Sometimes twice. He'd nod. Smile. That smile, wide, imperfect, honest. And I'd feel it again. That curl in my stomach. That quiet chaos behind my ribs. The first time I noticed the shape of his mouth when he smiled, I flinched. Literally flinched. Like the thought itself had struck me. Boys don't look at boys that way, I told myself. Not sons of oil magnates. Not heirs to empires. Not fiancés to girls named Zara Amasor. But I kept walking. Kept noticing. How his hands were calloused. How his forearms flexed when he lifted a bag of soil. How his lashes curled, unfairly long, especially when he was squinting in the sun. How his eyes, hazel and reckless, lingered on mine just a moment too long, as if he knew. And maybe he did. I hated it. I hated how it made my heart stutter, how it rewrote everything I thought I understood about desire. I hated the mirror for how it looked back at me after he smiled. I hated the shame for feeling something so beautiful. But most of all, I hated that I loved it. Loved the way his presence made the scripted world around me blur. Loved the danger in our silence. Loved that no one, not Zara, not my father, not the dozens of tutors and advisors who shaped me, had prepared me for him. One morning, he caught me watching. Really watching. He stood, hands on hips, a small grin tugging the corner of his mouth. "You always walk this path." I nodded. "It's the quietest one." "Funny," he said. "It gets louder every time you're on it." I opened my mouth, then closed it again. I had nothing clever to say. My tongue felt foreign. Zayden didn't press. Just turned back to his work, but the grin stayed. And I walked on, legs trembling, breath shallow, heart loud. Later that night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Zara's text on my screen. "Are you free this weekend for our engagement shoot?" I stared at it, at her name, at the future that had already been printed, framed, and hung. But my mind was in the garden, with the boy who shouldn't have mattered. And the way he looked at me, like maybe I did. I just loved his company. He could crack jokes with anything. He had a way of making my most gloomy days shine bright. Honestly, I don't remember the last time Zara made me laugh. Not truly laugh, the kind that bubbles up from somewhere deep, the kind that doesn't feel like it's been rehearsed or expected. With her, it always felt like I was playing a role, her perfect future husband, her partner in some perfect life. There was always the right thing to say, the right way to look, the right moment to kiss. We were scripted. But Zayden made me laugh like no one ever had. Gradually, the feelings became pronounced. A snort when I cracked a dry joke. A smirk when I tried to act serious about something trivial. He would tilt his head, a playful glint lighting up his eyes. He didn't just laugh with me, he laughed at me, in that way that made me feel less like a puppet and more like a man. A real one. One night, we sat under the mango tree near the edge of the estate, a slight breeze rustling through the leaves. The air was cool and thick with the smell of the earth, like rain had been close but decided against it. He was showing me how to pick the best mangoes from the tree. Don't pick the ones that fall on their own. They're too eager. He had this way of making the simplest things sound profound. He laughed, and it was like the sound of wind chimes clanging softly together. It's the ones you have to reach for, those are the ones that are worth it. I didn't know what he meant, but I listened. His voice, the way it dipped and soared, wrapped around me like something ancient and comforting. And then he said something about how the trees knew more about life than we did, and I laughed, a laugh that surprised me, a true burst from my chest. It felt like I'd been holding my breath for years. He looked at me, eyes wide in mock offense. "You laugh like you've forgotten how." I froze mid-laugh. I had. It wasn't just the joke. It was the way he saw me. How, for the first time, I didn't have to fit into someone else's mold. I didn't have to be the perfect son, the perfect fiancé, the perfect heir. With Zayden, I was just Ilium. Not a family name. Not a title. Just a person who could laugh. And then, when our hands brushed as we reached for the same mango, I froze. It wasn't an accident. I knew that. He knew that. The shock didn't come from the touch. It came from the electric charge that ran through me, from the warmth that seeped into my skin like sunlight. Zayden didn't pull away. He didn't flinch. Instead, he smiled, that same grin that always made my heart skip a beat. His hand stayed where it was, fingers slightly curled, as though waiting for me to make the next move. I should have pulled back. I should have laughed it off, pretended it was a mistake. But I didn't. I let my hand linger just a moment longer, not out of desire, but because it felt like the most real thing that had ever happened to me. Zara had never made me feel like that, alive in my own skin. Xaden did it effortlessly. I think you're right, I said quietly, avoiding his gaze. These mangoes do taste better when you reach for them. He nodded, but I could see the amusement still dancing in his eyes. The best things in life are the ones you don't expect, he said, as if it was a secret he had been dying to tell me. And I knew then, this wasn't just about mangoes or trees. It was about me. About how I was finally reaching for something I hadn't known I'd wanted. Something that felt as inevitable as breathing. It was about him. I never thought it would happen like this. There had always been a line, an invisible line I had drawn in my mind between what was right and what felt real. Between duty and desire. Between the life I was meant to live and the one I was beginning to crave. But the line faded the moment I kissed him. It wasn't planned. There was no alcohol to blur the edges of what was happening, no dare or foolish game to make the moment easier. It was just me, standing there under the mango tree, heart racing, hands trembling, terrified of the leap I was about to take. He didn't pull away. Xaden just watched me with those eyes of his, those eyes that seemed to understand everything and nothing all at once. His gaze held something I hadn't felt before, longing. An unspoken invitation. I couldn't look away. I didn't want to. My breath caught in my throat as I stepped closer, the world narrowing down to just the two of us. The leaves rustled in the wind, but felt like everything had slowed. Time didn't matter. I didn't care that I had a life already planned for me, one that involved Zara, that involved a future I didn't want but had accepted. In that moment, all of it felt distant. All of it felt irrelevant. He didn't move when I leaned in. His lips parted slightly, and I could feel the tension in the air. He was waiting for me. I kissed him first. It was soft at first, tentative, as if neither of us wanted to make it real just yet. But the moment our lips met, I knew. It was like a match striking in the dark. The sudden light, the sudden heat, it caught me off guard. I had never kissed anyone like that, not Zara, not anyone. His lips were warm, firm against mine, and he responded immediately, pulling me closer. His hands found my waist, grounding me, reminding me that this was real, that I wasn't dreaming. His kiss was urgent, but gentle, like he was trying to say something without words. And I understood. I kissed him back with everything I had. The kiss deepened, and it felt like I was unlocking something inside myself I didn't know was there. It wasn't just about the physicality, it was about what we were sharing. The moment was raw, and it was ours. It didn't belong to anyone else. When we finally pulled away, both breathless, I could barely meet his gaze. The world came rushing back, crashing into me, like a wave. But I didn't regret it. I couldn't regret it. Not when I knew deep down that this was the only thing that had ever felt true. I shouldn't have done that, I whispered, but my voice shook, betraying my own fear. Xaden smiled, that familiar crooked smile, and cupped my face gently, his thumb brushing across my cheek, like he had every right to be there. You didn't have to, he said softly, his voice low and filled with something unspoken. But I'm glad you did. In that moment, I understood something I had never understood before. I would never love anyone the way I loved him. Zara had always been a part of my life, a chapter one was supposed to play my part in. But this was something I had never been prepared for. This was real. And it scared me more than anything ever had before. But as I looked into Xaden's eyes, I realized something else. I didn't want to be scared anymore. I got tired of all the hide and seek. I needed to scream my affection for Xaden out to the world. I thought, maybe for a moment, that telling someone would bring me relief. That if I spoke the words aloud, they would lose their weight. That my secret, the one I had been hiding for so long, would no longer feel like a burden I had to carry alone. I told my brother first. I thought he would understand. He had always been the closest to me. He knew about Zara, knew about the future I had been raised to accept. He also knew that I had always been different. I never had the passion for the life our families had planned for us, never shared the excitement over arranged meetings, social gatherings, and inherited wealth. But he didn't know about Zayden. He didn't know about the way I felt when Zayden kissed me, the way it ignited something inside me that I could no longer ignore. I told him everything. How it happened. How I couldn't stop thinking about him. How Zayden made me feel alive. How in a world full of duty and expectation, Zayden was the only one who made me feel like I was living. Zayden, I whispered his name like it was something sacred, something that had changed everything. My brother listened quietly. His eyes never left mine, but I could see the confusion, the fear, and the judgment. He wasn't angry, not exactly, but there was a quiet alarm in his expression, as if he had already sensed what I hadn't yet fully understood. The world we lived in, the one I had been born into, would never allow this. It would never allow me to be myself. I needed someone to understand. But the moment I said those words, I realized something. I had just unleashed a storm. Less than 24 hours later, everything shattered. My father's wrath was swift and brutal. I didn't see it coming. It wasn't enough for him to be disappointed or angry with me. He couldn't let it go, not when the world's honor and his reputation were at stake. He had too much to lose. Zayden's house was raided. The front door was kicked in. I didn't even know how they found him. I didn't know who told them. But I knew my father had the power to reach anyone, to make anything disappear if it threatened the family's name. I heard the screams. I wasn't there, but I could hear them in my mind, replaying over and over. I heard the punches, the harsh words, the threats. My father's men, no, they weren't men, they were animals, beat him. Beat Zayden until his body was unrecognizable, bruised and battered. They warned him, over and over again, never to speak to me, never to see me again. I don't know how long they tortured him. I don't know how long they kept him locked in that house of his, or what they did to him before they left. But he survived. Barely. The next day, I found a note. It was simple, but it seared into my soul, as if each word had been written with blood. I won't die for your silence. Goodbye. I could hardly breathe when I read those words. My heart stopped. How could he leave me like that? How could he walk away after everything we had shared? After everything I had promised myself I would never let go of? But Zayden was stronger than I gave him credit for. He wasn't going to let me be a part of his tragedy. He wasn't going to let my silence dictate his fate. He chose his own survival, his own freedom, even if it meant walking away from me. And I was left there with nothing but the cold, empty space where he had been. The world that had once seemed like it belonged to me now felt alien and cruel. Zara, my father, my brother, none of them knew. None of them would ever understand. I wasn't the son they wanted. I wasn't the man I was meant to be. But I had Zayden. I had him in my heart, and that was enough. Wasn't it? I cried like he died. Not because I saw his body. There was no grave, no casket, no goodbye. But there was a silence so loud it buried everything inside me. And maybe that was a kind of death. The death of us. Of what we were. Of what we might have been if I hadn't chosen silence over him. Zayden was gone. And I wore grief like a second skin. When my mother walked into my room with the wedding plans in her hand, her face was a portrait of relief. As though my confession, my betrayal to the path they'd chosen, had just been a phase. Something they could erase with an altar and vows. Something a bride could fix. Zara had always been obedient, beautiful, poised, and raised with the same legacy-branded expectations I carried like chains. She didn't ask questions. Maybe she didn't want to. Maybe she knew deep down that I loved someone else. But when she stood in my doorway with her eyes glassy and her voice soft, All she said was, "Our parents think we should go ahead with the wedding. It's best for everyone." I wanted to scream, to tell her no, to tell her I couldn't love her, not in the way she deserved. But the words lodged in my throat, like the truth always did. My father ordered the guest list. My mother picked the flowers. Zara fitted her dress. And me? I stood in front of a mirror, buttoning up a black suit. It was tradition, our family's way of honoring legacy, the groom in black, the bride in white. But all I saw was a funeral. Because it was a funeral. It was the burial of a version of me I would never get back. The version who laughed under mango trees, who stole kisses when no one was watching, who tasted freedom in a boy's breath. The version who chose love. Zayden's love. I was burying him. Burying myself. I remember standing at the altar, watching Zara walk toward me like she was floating. The music played. The crowd whispered. And I thought of Zayden. Where was he now? Was he healing? Was he safe? Did he hate me? I blinked away the tears. Everyone thought I was emotional, moved by love, by the gravity of the moment. They had no idea I was mourning. That my heart was breaking with every step Zara took. That the man standing at the end of that aisle wasn't whole. He was hollow. The vows came. I repeated them like lines in a play. A performance for a world that never asked me what I wanted. And when Zara smiled at me, gently, lovingly, I smiled back. But inside, I was screaming. Zara is a good woman. The kind they write about in holy books, gentle in storms, unwavering in devotion. She never raises her voice, never questions where my mind goes when my eyes glaze over at dinner. She's patient, sweet even. And in another life, maybe I would have loved her properly. We built a life. 3 children. A mansion in Merida. Weekly charity dinners and vacations in Santorini. We look like a portrait of happiness. And sometimes I almost believe we are. Almost. But there are nights, God, there are nights, when she presses her lips to my neck, and my body responds like it's been trained. I touch her the way a husband should. But in my head I see him. The curve of his jaw. The wildness in his laughter. The heat in his eyes when he looked at me like I was something more than my surname. I see Zayden. And when we finish, when Zara lies curled against me, whispering thank you like it's a prayer, guilt claws its way into my ribs. Because I am a husband in body, but not in soul. Because even after all these years, even after children who carry my eyes and Zara's dimples, I still ache for someone I lost in my youth. Sometimes when a house is quiet, when the children are asleep and Zara hums softly from the kitchen, I sit by the window in the study and stare out into the night. I wonder, is he alive? Did he ever recover from what they did to him? Did he hate me? I wonder if he ever fell in love again, if someone else gets to hear that laugh, to feel those calloused fingers tracing secrets on skin. If someone else gets the version of him that I destroyed. There's no way to know. He disappeared, and no one ever mentioned his name again. My brother refuses to speak at that time, and my father made it clear that if I ever stepped out of line again, Zayden wouldn't just be beaten. He'd vanish. Sometimes I whisper his name when no one's around, just to remember how it feels in my mouth. Zayden, a name like honey and thunder. And though years have passed, and though my children think I'm a man worth admiring, I know what I am. A coward in a well-tailored suit. A man who traded truth for comfort. Love for legacy. Zara deserves better. So do my children. But my heart, it still beats to the rhythm of a kiss stolen under mango trees. And some nights, I sit with that ache like it's all I have left of him. One day Zara asked me a question. It was the kind of question you pretend not to hear. The kind you hope dissolves into the silence of a shared bed. But she asked it again, quietly, almost broken. Why don't you ever say my name? She wasn't angry. Zara never is. She asked it like someone holding a glass already cracked, just waiting for the last drop to break it completely. I looked at the ceiling. counted the fan blades, pretended I hadn't heard. She didn't press further, but her voice stayed with me. All day. Through breakfast with the children, through the polite smiles of staff, through board meetings and cocktail hours. It clung to me like perfume I didn't wear, soft, persistent, unavoidable. Why don't you ever say my name when you make love to me? Because sometimes I forget where I am. That I'm here, in this house, in this life. Because sometimes I remember another bed. Humble, bare, sheets warm from sun and breathless laughter. Because sometimes when my eyes are closed and my body moves without thought, I am 19 again. And Zayden is beneath me, or above me, or just beside me, saying my name like it meant something. Because sometimes in the heat of it, in that split second when I unravel, I whisper his name. Zayden. Not loud. Never loud. But real. It slips out like a ghost. A memory too heavy to bury. And I think Zara hears it, feels it in the way I hold her, almost like I'm apologizing. Once, I dreamed I said his name aloud, mid-thrust, breathless and burning. And in the dream, Zara stopped, stared, and simply said, I knew. I woke in sweat. The kind of sweat that feels like sin. It wasn't always like this. In the early years, I tried. I focused. I prayed. I told myself Zayden was a chapter long closed, a youthful confusion. But lust fades and love, real love, it haunts. Zara has her suspicions. How can she not? She sees the way I flinch when men touch each other on screen. The way my eyes follow backs more than curves. The way I zone out when she talks about us growing old together. She's not stupid, but she is kind. And kind people bury their pain in politeness. I never answer her question. She hasn't asked again. But now, every time we're close, I feel her listening. Bracing. Waiting for a name that isn't hers. And I hate myself for what I've made her carry. For ghosts that shares our bed. For the way love, real, painful, unapologetic love, left and somehow never really left at all. People say children carry the best of us. I think they carry the truths we try hardest to bury. My youngest, Isaiah, is 5 now. Full of light. The kind of boy who finds joy in ants and asks questions that break your soul. And his eyes, those impossibly wide, almond-shaped eyes, they aren't mine. They're not Zara's either. They're Zayden's. The first time I noticed, he was eating mangoes on the back porch. Juice running down his chin. Laughing at something I didn't find funny. And for a split second, I forgot where I was. I forgot Zara. I forgot the years. I saw him. Zayden. Barefoot. Smiling up at me beneath that old mango tree. The one we used to meet under when we thought love alone might be enough. I had to sit down. Isaiah kept laughing, asking me why I looked so sad. I didn't know how to tell him, because you look like the boy I let the world destroy. Sometimes late at night, Isaiah comes into our room when he's had a nightmare. He curls beside me like Zayden used to, without asking, like it was his place. And in those small hours, when everyone's asleep but my memory, I stroke his hair and think about how different life could have been. How maybe, just maybe, in some other version of the world, Zayden and I had a child like this. A home like this. A love that wasn't crucified in silence. Zara sees it too. I think she always has. When she looks at Isaiah, there's this moment, so quick you could miss it, where something flickers in her eyes. Not quite pain. Not quite understanding. Just knowing. One afternoon, she handed me an old photo album. Inside a picture of Zayden and me by the stables. I must have been 17. He was smiling. I wasn't. Zara had circled the photo in pencil. Beneath it, in her neat handwriting, were 3 words. He has his eyes. I didn't ask how she got the picture. I didn't ask what she meant by giving it to me. She didn't say anything more. Just left it on the desk and walked away.